I'm gonna turn this up so that whenever this beeps, I can hear it. I'm sorry, where was I? Okay, yeah. So Dan means judge, and Naphtali means wrestling. Which I think that that's really interesting, considering that in 2 chapters is where you're going to have Jacob wrestling with God, and that language there of "I have wrestled with X and have prevailed" is the same language that gets used about like you have wrestled with God and have prevailed. Um, but the word wrestle is slightly different. Like the same like root word, like niftal or whatever, does get used in both places. But then whenever it actually says like a lot of places it gets striven with God, that's like a completely different word. And actually, it's weird because that word doesn't sound like Israel at all. But everybody, I don't know, you do weird etymology stuff to be like, these words are connected. We'll deal with that whenever the time comes. But I want to highlight just kind of the like the harshness and kind of the edge that both of these sons' names have. Right, one being judge and the other one being wrestling, and compare that to these next 2 sons.
When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah said, "Good fortune has come." So she called his name Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, "Happy am I, for women have called me happy." So she called his name Asher. In the days...
Okay, so you have like Leah's response to her sister, right? Which is, well, if you can do that, I can do that too. And when she does that, she picks names that are more positive. So Gad can either mean good fortune or a troop, and a troop as in just like a lot of people. And so you can kind of think of it as like Leah's thinking, oh, I was barren, but now I'm going to bring forth like a bunch of more sons and all that stuff. I mean, it's just ends up being 2 more sons, but you have that. And then you have this, I'm being this happiness thing. And so Leah is far and away in the lead here. And now we get to the mandrakes.
Wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" Rachel said, "Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband." So she called his name Issachar.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there.
So she prostituted her own husband.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah. And so this whole bit is weird. Yeah, so like
That's why you should only have one wife.
Rachel pimps out her husband to her sister in exchange for some mandrakes. Okay, well, that's actually exactly the reason.
What?
Yes. Which is what I was going to get into.
Did it grow into a Tower of Babel?
There's going to be more of a lead into that, but if you just brought it up, yes. The thing that I want to pitch to you is that the mandrakes were probably supposed to be magical. So
I just looked it up and it says that.
yeah, so if you and even if you click on it in the Step Bible, if you click on there, it'll call it like oh
It's from the Nightshade family, which is like a poisonous plant.
yes, so
It's used in medicine.
yeah, it calls it the
and
love
magic,
apple, right? So
and it shrieks apparently when you pull it from the ground.
that's from mythology.
That's
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
But Harry Potter got that from standard like mythology. But yes, but like so yeah, so it'll have it here for love apple. So mandrakes, so that word, it only appears 2 places in the Old Testament, here and in the Song of Solomon. So that should like be enough of an indication.
Word for mandrake?
Yeah, like that exact word for mandrake,
Is there
right?
another word for mandrake that comes up?
I don't think so.
If so, it's not important.
Yeah, it's a maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But the point is like, okay, what's going on here? What is she using? Okay, so mandrakes were often seen as something for fertility and to cure sterility, right? And unable to be unable to give birth. Okay. And even in like your Harry Potter mythology, right? They're shown as like little babies and stuff. So why is that? Well, part of the reason is because if you look at a mandrake at
It said it, the roots or something had like a human form.
yes, if you look at the roots, they so I'm gonna try and
Stick figure kind of?
let me see if I can. So, oh yeah, this is a really tiny picture. You guys are not. So the roots basically have these 2 portions that kind of like often like cross,
I see it.
Right?
online.
and so basically they kind of look like human legs, right? Is the idea. But you can also get larger, weirder shapes, and so this one actually, this whole root here has been carved into like the shape of a human. But they have the kind of human shape, and also they look like legs, right? And so it kind of makes sense why if someone is infertile, you'd be like, ooh, consume this thing that sort of looks like human legs, and then your legs will start to work, right? Like it's not that wild of an idea for like of a weird theory that you might pitch to somebody. But also what they're doing is because mandrakes are all poisonous and hallucinogenics, they're drugs, it would make you like all drugged out. And so
Make you think you had a baby.
well, and but also act as, and the idea would be acting as like an aphrodisiac kind of a thing. And so it makes sense as to why they would be commonly used in like kind of like shamanistic witchcraft practices and all that stuff. The thing that's interesting to me here is the fact that it's not it doesn't get used, or it seems to not get used, at least not by Leah, right? Because Leah doesn't take the mandrakes to have more kids. She gives up the mandrakes and stops and doesn't use them. We don't know if she had like a steady supply of them. Reuben apparently just found them one year. We don't know if like she routinely had them, but she's willing to give them up in order to actually try and pursue her husband. And so because of that, she is rewarded by God with a child, which is why that child's name is Issachar. There is recompense, or there is a reward it's the reward for her being willing to give up those mandrakes, to be willing to give up this potential tool that she could have used to beat her sister even more in this game that they're in. She gave that up, and therefore God blessed that. Okay. We're gonna end up referencing this more, but we'll keep.
It's still kind of weird to me though that like, and obviously like not that I would understand God's ways in all of this, but like if it actually was like God specifically blessing her of the kid, it kind of doesn't make sense as like they both were like, well, she also just gave her servant, which is like immoral, though I guess they didn't know that yet. But also like she already apparently had 4 kids naturally, plus the kids she got through the servant. So it's kind of surprising that like God let her have yet another one. I guess it's just whatever.
Well, I mean, she's gonna have another one and a daughter, so.
And Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob the 6th son.
Jeez.
Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah.
So that line about Dinah is mostly important for a story that's going to come. There's a story surrounding Dinah a little bit later. People try to say that that's Jacob's only daughter. I don't know if that's actually the case, but we have that issue with a lot of people about knowing whether or not, because often the daughters weren't recorded.
Is it possible they only mention that daughter because that daughter comes up later?
I think that's how I feel about it. I think she's probably only mentioned because she comes up later. But yeah, and so Zebulon is a reference to that endowment in Step Bible. It also has it translated as exalted, which I was like, okay, but if you compare like the words, it's most similar to the ones about God has endowed me with a good endowment. But so Leah's had her like fullness, and now something good is finally going to happen for Rachel.
Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her. She conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son.
Okay, so a couple things here. One, I don't know what the time delay is between this Mandrake story and this story of whenever Rachel is actually able to give birth. It's not clear to me as like, were the Mandrakes supposed to have worked? But like,
well, she at least gives credit to God, though.
But she did. But yeah, right. And so she gives credit to God.
Behold, the mandrakes have worked.
And I mean, also, if you're going in a strict chronological order, well, Leah gives birth to 3 kids before Rachel gives birth to Joseph. So those mandrakes are probably not around for like that time frame.
She used them during all that time, and she was like, these are both.
These are bogus. So she might have used them. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, surely she used them right when she got them.
You would think.
But also, then that also supports what you said, because there's no way God would have been like, all right, I'll give her this son now, I'll make her think, because like how many times it's like God's like, oh, Gideon, you have too many people. I want you to know.
You need to get rid of it. You need to run out of your microdoses before I make it work. Yeah. But also I like this idea of, and then God remembered Rachel. And God listened to her and opened her womb. That God remembered Rachel is that remembering is an action. It's not a state of God's knowledge.
Right? Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, it's not a. I forgot that Rachel existed. I forgot that I was supposed to be doing something for her. Yeah, right. It's a I had a plan, and now is the time where like your portion of the plan comes into play, and so now I'm gonna make it happen.
It's like a past tense, but like still present tense. Remember.
Yes.
Like he remembered all that.
But also, and so the way that one of the podcasts I listened to, the way that they described it, which I really like, is like whenever you say so and so remembered their birthday, it's like if I remember someone's birthday, that means that I got them something and I am giving them like a gift for their birthday. It's not like it's not just a action opening her womb. We can stop sharing this. Oh, this. No, it's working, but like it does this thing where we have like a 2-minute counter, and if I don't click the thing on that 2-minute counter, it shuts off the call, and I'm like, it's really annoying. But I think it usually makes a sound, which so I turn the sound all the way up on it. But okay. And then Joseph's name means like Yahweh is going to add. And what Rachel thinks here that the Lord's going to add another son to her. That she so like, is this a prophecy? I don't know. Or is it a prayer? I mean, definitely. She's wanting another son, but she's really happy about this first son. I don't think that it's a coincidence that Joseph is the last son that's mentioned in this competition, right? So Rachel is going to have another son eventually, Benjamin, but she's going to die giving birth to Benjamin. But I think the reason why this competition stopped right here and the next story is going to happen is because Joseph was born. And it's probably because the thing that Jacob was probably waiting for was like for Rachel to give birth.
Like
Right.
actually give
Like
birth,
to act like
not her
at
surrogate child.
right, because that's like what he's like trying to like. That's his preferred like method that the line is going to go down. It's not going to be like the one that necessarily the preferred line goes down. It will for like a little bit, right? Because Joseph is gonna, but you can tell that Jacob is. We'll get into this more because Jacob also like, whenever Joseph starts having his dreams and gets his pretensions about being greater than everybody, Jacob gets a little bit mad and smacks him down a little bit. It's like, hey, don't think you're such hot stuff. But it does seem to me that like, even though you are, that he does kind of prefer him, right? And obviously, like, he does kind of prefer because he gives him the coat of many colors and like all this stuff. He prefers Joseph, and I think that preference of Joseph.
Part of the story was that it was the favorite.
He was the favorite, right? And I think that in this, the structure of the stories, I think partly show us how he's the favorite, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. So, okay, the next part.
country. My children, for I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you. But Laban said, I have found favor.
Okay. So again, so the Jacob's like, I'm good now. I got a son from Rachel. Simeon, like I'm good to go. And we have this classic problem that we have with Laban, which is that he wants way more out of the deal than what's fair. We have this line about I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. I think that line is really funny because you wouldn't need to use divination there. You could just look. And I think that there are some translations that translate that as I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me. I'm not sure what the reasoning is on that, but I did see that one where people were like, "Oh, it should say experience there," and I was like, "Okay, well, it says divination." And then we have the same classic problem of him going, "Name your wages. I'm going to be really nice to you. Name your wages," but really, he's just looking for openings to screw him over. And so I think what Jacob comes back here with is interesting, and we're going to end up spending a lot of time talking about all this stuff.
Yourself know how I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now when shall I provide for my own household also?
I'm going to pause it real briefly. The word for wherever I turned is in Hebrew, the word for turn is actually foot there. And so I think that's really interesting if whenever you compare that, because we'll often hear the phrase like, he blessed where I went to, but he's also saying here, like, he blessed wherever I put my foot. So I just thought that was interesting.
He said, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen.
Okay, we'll come back to a lot of this stuff, but just another little thing that I wanted to highlight is that the word honesty there is the root word is going to be sedek, which is that righteousness thing again. And so my righteousness will answer for me later. And so I think that this whole scenario really showcases Jacob trying to because Jacob's already he's kind of been he's been promised the covenant by God himself now. He's had this meeting and this revelation with God. Jacob is really trying to do things correct and properly now, even though he's been screwed over by Laban, and he probably should rightly fear that he's going to continue to be screwed over by Laban, but he's like, I'm still going to try and do the right thing. I'm going to try and play within the rules. And so he's going to try and do this with righteousness.
Laban said, let it be as you have said. But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. And Jacob took fresh sticks of
Okay, so before we get to this last thing, I want to emphasize that Jacob is trying to put so Jacob is getting screwed over, right? Like Laban's like, cool, you've named your price. I know how to screw you over now. Let me figure out how to screw you over. If Jacob wanted to, right, he could send some of his sons or some of his hired servants over and, do that 3 days journey and steal a couple of the spotted and speckled lambs back, and then have them mix in, and that's how he grows what's going to be his flock. But he doesn't do that. He's instead going to stay in the line, stay within the rules of what he agreed to. But what he does is going to be really weird. So yeah, we'll finish this out.
burning trees and peeled white streaks, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
Okay.
I don't see how that would work.
Neither does anyone else.
Family.
It's
And
like
so-
showing a dog a picture of a pink flower and thinking then the puppy will come out with a pink flower on his back.
Right. And that's the thing. And so it's like when you read commentaries on this, it is a whole bunch of people going, we don't know what's going on here. like no one knows what's going on here. It's really, really weird. Which is why, and so
Maybe this like plant or something messed with the genetics of the animals.
so there's so many theories. So there's so some people are like, maybe it messed with the genetics. Maybe one of the commentaries literally was like, maybe Jacob just knew something about animal husbandry that modern people don't know. And I was like, that's kind of weak.
They would have
'Cause-
figured it out by now.
yeah,
in
you think-
context.
Yeah, you think nobody has tried this since then? Like, I guarantee you some Israelite out there was just like,
A bunch of Jewish tricks.
yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just see what happens.
Was this a common tree in God's favor? That's
And so here's the thing.
That's what makes the
It doesn't, and so it doesn't seem like it's a common thing, right? It seems like it's a one-off thing. So I'm just gonna say it seems like it's a one-off thing. It seems magical, right? Like, let's just be honest.
Jacob took the beans.
It seems like Jacob is just being magical here, right? We're gonna find out in the next chapter
Oh.
that Jacob says that this basically he says that it works because of God. Now, you're not really sure did God tell Jacob to do all of this stuff,
God
or
said,
did
like,
Jacob just do all I'll make it work? Yeah.
Right.
It's
You're
not
not even gonna screw you over for like over a decade.
that's literally the reasoning. Is it? It's like even screwed you over, so I'm going to do this to make it work.
I'll let your sheep be straightened.
Right, but it's not sure. So my opinion here is that So there's a bunch of and it's so weird because the commentaries don't know how to take this. They don't know. They don't know whether to say like, is it what doing or like, is it good or is it bad? Is it like some pagan thing? Is it some magical thing? Like, they don't really know. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing. I think that it is supposed to be magical. Okay. I think that it is conceivable that he thinks that he got it from God. I don't know if he did, but I think that he thinks that he got it from God.
What else would it be?
Right. I also think that this story is intrinsically tied to the story that comes before it with the mandrakes. And I also think that it is tied to Joseph. And it's going to be tied to Joseph in a very weird and kind of not clear way. But so if we first just take this story with the Mandrake story, both of them are about fertility and gain, right? And both of them are about trying to use some external thing to bring about gain. Okay. The first one, though, I think you're supposed to see as a well-known practice that people in the land are doing. The second one, I think you're supposed to see. You just said that down. The second one, I think you're supposed to see as kind of like hidden wisdom from God that nobody really knew about, right? Because we don't really seem to have any indication that anybody else like did this, that this was like a regular thing. What is he doing? What the way that I read it and the way that I see it of what's going on is, okay, so it's pretty obvious. Jacob is making the trees look like what he wants the sheep to be. And he sticks them in front of their eyes while they are procreating, right? While they are in the middle of like their like intimate act, right? And so you have this idea of kind of idea, right? And it's not that hard to grasp of whatever you are looking at and whatever you are focused on, that is what you will become, right? Because that's what he's doing to the sheep. He's having them focus on this thing
in like a very literal
in a very literal way, and then they become this thing, right? And so they stare at and they embrace, and you should also think about, okay, in order for this to make sense and in order for me to tie it into everything that I want to tie it into, where do sticks and everything come from? Trees. And where do trees come from? Seeds, the ground, right? They come up out of the ground and right, they come up out of the ground and they're broken off. And so this thing that comes up out of the ground, broken off, it's now dead. It's made to look at what you want, and then like you become that thing. Okay. So I'm tying it to Joseph. So Joseph is like at the center of these two stories, right? So you have a common magical practice at the time versus a hidden magical practice of God that stems from God. Which practice works? The one stemming from God. Okay. Joseph is going to end up taking the family where? Egypt. And and while they're in Egypt, they are in exile, right? They're in exile from the land. What are they at right now? A mini exile from the land, right? So that's how, right? They're exiled from the land. They're trying to go back to the land, okay? While they're in the land, right? And we've talked about this because this is the same pattern, right? I've mentioned how I'm like, okay, Abraham, they go down, they're going down, and and then what do? They do a little trick. They do a trick of identity, and whenever they're brought back up out of it, they're brought back up out with material wealth. And how do we know that language should be thought of as the same? That last verse, thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants, male servants, camels, and donkeys. That kind of phrase is used at the same time for whenever whenever Abraham comes back out of Egypt, he has male servants and female servants. And then whenever Isaac goes down, has that whole little thing with Abimelech. Whenever he comes back out of it, he has male servants and female servants and all this stuff, right? So 400 years after Joseph is going to be Moses. And what is Moses doing in the land? He goes up, right? And he's trying to get them back out. And how does Moses prove who he is? He does some tricks with a stick. He does a magic trick. And it's not that his magic trick works and that their magic trick doesn't. It's that his magic is stronger than their magic, right? Because Pharaoh's wizards, their sticks turn into snakes too, but his snake eats their snakes, right? So you have this connection about like, you might have your ways of doing stuff and they might work. Sure, we'll grant that. And maybe sometimes we'll try it, right? But ultimately, God is above all of that and can do it way better. Okay. What's the ultimate pattern of this story of going down and then bringing back material back out? It's Jesus. I mentioned this before. What is he doing? What's Jesus doing whenever he's going down into death? He's fulfilling that first prophecy of the snake, right? And what does the snake bite? His heel, right? And your heel is where? But it's on the ground, right? So this snake is a thing that comes up out of the ground, causes death. But if you accept that death, you accept the rules that death is going to do. When that death bites you and latches onto your foot, you know exactly where it is and you can crush it, which is what Christ does. Christ goes, these are your rules. Like Satan, you've set up this whole system. You have death. I accept the death. And now that you've latched on to me, that was a mistake. I crush you now and I've destroyed you. What's happening in this story? There's a set of rules. Not allowed to do it. I look at the rules, right? I look at the thing. So I'm trying to make a comparison here between looking at the sticks and looking at those things and going, I accept that that's what it is. Crush it, defeat it, and come out of it with gain. Okay. So I know that was like a big like thing, and like I'm making jumps here, but for me, for a story where every single time I've looked at it, people come up back with, I don't know what the heck that is. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what the heck that is either. But it looks like that's what he's doing. It looks like it's some kind of
That's
like,
at least a plausible
I think it's
symbolism to take from.
it's the most plausible symbolism that I can apply to it. Is that seems to be what's going on? Is that like he's accepting what it is and he's going, okay, I'm gonna do this trick, but a trick that is within the rules. And And so, because I'm doing a trick that's within the rules, I'm accepting the rules. I'm accepting the state that I'm in. I'm being humble, which is different from what he was doing previously, right? When he previously tricked his dad, right? That was pretty clearly like that wasn't cool, man. Like you went against the rules here. Like you did not do what you were supposed to do here, and so he got punished for that. You know, that's why he gets cast out, like at least partially, right? Which we talked about. But it seems to me that is what's going on here, and that's the best sense that I can make out of it, and it's the best sense that I can make out of it as to why God would bless it. And it also seems like it's a one-off thing, but it definitely seems to me that it should be some sort of it should be some sort of like polemic against don't do what everybody else does, right? Don't do all the little mandrake and potion and shaman charms that everybody else does. If you're really wise and righteous, maybe God will give you some secret knowledge about some cool little thing that you can do. But regardless, follow God in his ways and like you'll be prosperous. And I kind of wanted to mention that because this to me is, I think that this is probably the first place in the Bible where you could argue that a person kind of performs a miracle, right? Like, everything that's sort of miracle-like prior to this is usually just God doing something, right? Like God makes it flood, God turns like does Sodom and Gomorrah, God turns Lot's wife into a pillar of salt. There's a lot of God doing miracles, and God is obviously the power behind this, but there's not usually.
This is like man initiated.
Yeah. This is like a man initiated one. It's like really the first one, like that. Everything else prior to this seems to be more initiated by God, and so I think that that's maybe part of the reason why it's so weird. But even whenever you get to the New Testament, a lot of the miracles are weird. You know, I mean, like Jesus does weird stuff. Jesus does the whole thing with mud and spit and like all of this stuff. You have whenever you get to like Gideon's whole thing with the candles and the pots and all that stuff, like you start getting into, and he does all the stuff like the fleece and all this junk. And so yeah, you're gonna get
That is his preference though.
yeah.
All right, this is a weird one, God. This is a bit of a king.
But he picks that one, right? And so like I think it makes a little bit of sense of like, okay, if the patriarchs are like, we're gonna start coming up with like these weird things that we can do, maybe it'll work. And so maybe it's just the start of before you have people being like, how about we listen to God first rather than just start doing weird stuff and hoping that God blesses it, or maybe it is straight from God. You know?
I think part of it kind of reflects on Jacob's heart, because like how you said, like if the patriarchs just were just like, all right, let's just keep trying stuff and see what gets through and what doesn't. You know, like maybe God was in the mood and he'll bless this crazy idea to come up with. But like,
Sure,
that's not Jacob's intention here. His intention is not just like, oh, I'm gonna like get that Laban back so bad, and it's gonna be all me, and this is a great idea I'm having. You know, he's just like, all right, I'll do it this way, and he just seems very humble about it. Of course, doesn't say what's on his mind, you know, but
yeah, we don't
based
have
on how
that.
he's been the past.
What it seems like is going on.
Yeah.
I like to think that he was just really dumb and thought it would work, and God's just sitting back like, what are you? You know what?
Damn it, out of the way.
And then Jacob tries to tell people about how that works, and they try to like,
They're like, it's not working. I've tried it.
yeah, I honestly don't think you
Because
can rule that
all
out.
of like all of Jacob's like ideas, he never comes up with. Like his first one was his mom.
Yeah,
He doesn't strike me as very smart when I read the Bible.
Yeah,
He gets-
no.
He's always getting tricked, always getting taken advantage of. Every good idea is never his. And things just kind of work.
I mean, he did.
He learned farming.
He did have a good. Yeah.
Everybody.
He had a good lie to his dad. Well, I mean, an effective lie to his
He does
dad.
deceive Esau in like literally his first
Yeah,
story.
he does
Yeah.
deceive Esau.
That's
he
like
does.
his biggest.
He does move a rock. No, it doesn't. He moves a rock.
I'm gonna say it's a
Uh,
really big one.
He stacks a bunch of other rocks on top of each other, which that's not like a scheme or anything.
Jacob's a white girl.
He does come up with the scheme, which he's gonna do in a bit whenever he goes back, of being like, let's put everybody else in front of me so maybe Esau will kill them before he kills me. I mean, that's not a terrible idea. It's very cowardly. Yeah, and selfish. Yeah, it's not the worst plan. But yeah, no, he's not super smart as far as I can tell.
So I was just
Yeah.
like thinking about this, because it's like borderline. It does seem like Jacob's almost trying to like trick Laban, but it's like it's like innocent though at the same time. It's
Well,
such
also,
a weird
Laban's a
gray area.
dick.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Laban. Yeah.
Right.
Laban's a jerk.
But-
And Laban's gonna keep. Laban does more
Like, this
things.
isn't-
Like Laban's not done being a jerk. There's
He
more
already,
things.
like screwed him over like 14 years of his life with the whole marriage thing, and he's
Over 14.
And his
He's
dad,
been
too.
married for 20 years.
yeah.
Yeah, he got his dad Isaac too.
Yeah. Like yeah. Laban's a scrub.
But like obviously we know. I mean, as having all of us grown up in church, we know that just because someone's been a jerk to you for even 2 decades, God's not going to bless your wrath against them.
No.
So we know that
Yeah.
if God gave sort of his miraculous touch on Jacob's little silly trick here, obviously God knew something that is not shown in the text, and so obviously we're left to think, all right, well, maybe Jacob thought this, maybe all these commentaries, maybe one of these is right, but like,
Yeah.
one way or another, Jacob had decent enough intentions, and God blessed him.
Yeah, and that's why
That's
to
the two
me,
things that matter
the,
the
mo- the and that's why to me, like that's why I said the whole thing of like, because I was just thinking about like, okay, like I'm put into this situation, and I'm like, okay, how do I go about gaining these speckled sheep?
It's like, how do I go
To
back on
me,
this
the
hill,
answer
but
is you
still
go
in
and
a
you
fair
take
way?
them, like you go and you
I thought he was
and
gonna
you make
say-
a
Put them all in one place for me.
Yeah, well, and you make an excuse of like, well, look, Laban, I was the one that have been looking after your flocks for 14 years. I knew exactly how many like spotted and
Call them
speckled
out.
sheep were in here, and now suddenly they're all gone. I was supposed to check these today, and you sent your guys out before me and took them all away. So it's like Jacob knew there's no way Jacob didn't know immediately that he had been cheated. Like he would have been able to tell immediately.
Oh, he knew he was cheated. I just don't think he knew where they were.
I mean, maybe,
'Cause he
but
could have
even
done it and then not even known about it.
that's true. Like that,
And then
that-
like, well, I'm pretty sure that I had this many I could have.
but even if that's the case, you would think that he'd be able to be like,
ask him about
well, like ask
Confront
somebody about it, send out because like remember he has people that like work for him. He's got people that work for him. He also has a multitude of sons at this point. At least one that's old enough to go find mandrakes.
Surely.
You could send him out as a spy and be like, hey, go find out where your
And the
uncle
kids just
sent
stay
him
looking
off."
for mandrakes.
Yeah.
Those people, they would have seen a whole herd of
A man would like go. Yeah, exactly. And so
It
like
does say he put it this in the 3 days journey.
a 3 days journey, which one commentary said that would probably be about 60 miles, and so it's like, okay,
Yeah,
like,
like,
sure,
yeah.
that's that's a hefty distance. But also, you can't put 3 days journey between you and another person immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, hey, yeah,
Like-
you can take a look at my flock, wake up the next morning, he's gone.
Yeah,
You know?
He's 3 days away already.
Yeah, no,
And
like,
he has a history of just being smart. So like Jacob knew instantly.
yeah, exactly.
It's almost like Jacob gave Laban the opportunity to do good.
Yeah,
Like
Knowing that he wouldn't do it, but still.
I think kind of like you have a chance to screw me over, but I'm hoping that you're not.
Yes.
But if you
Yeah.
do anyways, I'm gonna.
yeah. Well,
I'm gonna put
there'll
these
still
branches
be
by the water. Don't make me do it.
yeah, there'll still be a way to like that.
Laban, oh, okay.
Right, and I think that there's a
I'm
good.
gonna peel these branches.
I think that there's a good lesson, like especially in that point of being like, okay, I understand that you can potentially screw me over here, but I recognize that no matter what's going to happen, like God's going to be with me. God's going to take care of me, and that actually we're going to find out next week. That's literally what Jacob said. Jacob's like, God was with me during all of this stuff, so like, I didn't need to be like worried about
And
it.
Laban even said the Lord is blessing because of you. So like Laban knows that
Yeah,
really he has no right to win.
but again, Laban is going to try and Laban's going to be the person that tries to even leverage God to his favor, right? And so like you can even see that, and that's why it's like, okay, Laban to me is just a complete example of scummy people in the church. It's like yeah, and there's scummy people in the church that try to be like, ooh, this person right here is actually effective at preaching the word or doing something like that or blah blah blah. Blah. I'm going to try and use them for my own gain, and it's like,
Makes me think of
Yeah.
the guy Ellis in Die Hard. You've seen Die Hard, right?
yes,
It's like
yeah.
he's one of the captives who goes to talk to Hans, the Germans. He's just
Yes.
like, hey Hans, boom, and then he's like, help me out here.
No, yeah, like
That's
that's
Laban.
that basically is Laban. Yeah, just being like, oh hey, this seems to be working out. Like, let me get in on that. But I'm not gonna. But like you knew, like the second that like the second that like it's no longer advantageous for him to be in that relationship, it's like, okay, we're gonna break off.
Oh yeah, you go home now.
Right. And like I said, I don't want to talk about too much because we're gonna get into that. But yeah. So any other questions or comments or?
Jacob is the master of disguise. He's so crazy. Work.
All right, I'll stop it there.